Here also.
If you can hear my voice, clap one. It works in every setting. That's great. Good afternoon, everyone. How are you all doing? Great. We are going to start our meeting off. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We're not all sitting together, so I'll have to pass the mic over. But I am Stacy Pulliam. I am the commissioner for District 2. I am one of the co-chairs for this housing study committee. And we have our chair, Commissioner Francine Scott, the person that actually put the study committee together, Commissioner Francine Scott, and our co-chair, Commissioner Wayne Guilfoyle. So I want to give the floor to both of them to be able to introduce themselves as well.
Good afternoon. I am Francine Scott. I'm your Super District 9 Commissioner. And I believe we was talking on the floor about putting some stoppage to some apartment building. And I wanted to make sure this is something that we wanted to do. I'm not sure how we got to say we're going to stop it without having some concrete or some discussion on why, other than we got too many. We need to make sure, housing is a problem in Augusta, in Richmond County. So that's the reason I asked that a study committee be convened, and I asked Commissioner from the Super District 10, Wayne Guilfoyle, and Stacy Pulliam to be co-chairs of this study committee, and let's get some conversation going from not just in Richmond County. We should go outside of Richmond County. We should go maybe to neighboring states and with similar size population on what we need to do, and if this is something that we need to stop for 3 months.
Good afternoon. Wayne Guilfoyle, Mayor Pro Tem. I'd like to introduce our Mayor of Augusta, Richmond County, Mayor Johnson. The reason why I actually had to put the moratorium of the apartment complexes on the agenda is that foreseeing that the only way in South Richmond County we could have more growth, attract big box stores, etc., is what we were told from realtors 10 years ago, 12 years ago, is to have rooftops. Well, when you look at all these apartment complexes, the influx and the havoc that they do place on our infrastructure, not only from the water, the sewage, to the roads, to the schools. That's if you go to Gordon Highway and Martin Chapel Road. Not everybody can afford a house, naturally, but you've got no different than my wife and me did. We started off on the starter home, and from there we moved up. That's what I guess most people in this room does. You don't buy a $300,000 to $500,000 house as your first house unless you're doing well. But my challenge that I see with apartment complexes is that they are growing expeditiously in Augusta, Richmond County. Now, our director is supposed to be telling us how many apartment complexes, units we have versus houses. Anybody that buys a house is going to take care of it. 10 years from now, if you bought a house, you're going to take care of the house for 10 years. If you rent apartment complexes, or rent an apartment, you're going to have 5, 6 different tenants living in that one apartment complex. And it depends on the management company on how they take care of that. Usually in 10 years versus somebody owning a house for 10 years, an apartment complex doesn't look as good as somebody's house. And that's where my concern is that as we move forward, I don't have a problem with the apartment complexes here in the District 1 area, the business district. That's where all the millennials is wanting to move. This is where a lot of jobs is created downtown with Nathan Dill putting in Cyber Command. This is the happening place to be. When Nathan Dill actually built the Cyber Command, we had a lot lot of developers that wanted to build downtown. So if you drive by any apartment complex, and you look at an apartment complex that's 10, 15 years old, right through a neighborhood that's 10 to 15 years old, this day and night. And that's what my concern is the future and what we want for Augusta and what we want Augusta to be. So that's my take on it. And I'm here as a co-chair. You know, I'd rather hand it off to the chairman, Francine Scott, Super 9, as well as Stacy. But I'd like to hear everybody's viewpoints, from the Home Builder Association to the developers, as well as the chamber and whoever else we have here. So that's my take. Who do you want to give the phone mic back to you, Jose?
Out of respect, Mayor Johnson, did you want to greet everyone? Sorry.
Well, good day, everybody. It's always a pleasure to have you guys here, especially in the Linda Beasley room. I'm here primarily as an observer, just to listen and to learn. Of course, I have my ideas about where I strongly believe we should be regarding our mix of family units versus apartment units. But I'm here to listen and hear from the building community, as well as the chamber and the public. So thank you guys for being here, and I'm looking forward to a great dialogue. Madam Chairwoman?
Thank you so much. I'll be leading the meeting on today. We also have two of our other commissioners, Commissioner Catherine McKnight, as well as Commissioner Tina Slendak with us on today. So if I could just do a brief, go around the room to introduce yourselves, as well as the organization you're representing, and then we'll move on from there. And I'm going to start on that side over there that I'm pointing to.
I'm Liz Bragg. I'm a realtor with Fletcher County. I'm also the sales and marketing chair for the Home Builders Association. Was it louder? So I'm Liz Bragg. I'm a realtor with Blanchard County, and I'm the chair for the Sales and Marketing Council for the Home Builders Association.
I'm Joe Galino for Bill Beasley Homes. I'm in charge of all their land development.
Tiffany Heinzman, I'm the Executive Director of the Home Builders Association of Augusta-Aiken Region.
Jason Winter with Ivy Development.
Sam Mallard, Senior Staff Attorney, Augusta Law Department.
Carla Delaney, Planning and Development Director.
Douglas Freeman, Deputy Executive Director for the Augusta Housing Authority.
Hal Summers, Real Estate Investor and a Property Manager at Remax Your Advantage.
I'm Angela Sarofler Lopez, the President for the Realtors of Greater Augusta.
I'm Stephanie Clark with EXP Realty.
Commissioner Catherine Smith Rice, District 3.
Ronnie West with the Greater Augusta Black Chamber of Commerce.
Good afternoon. I'm Angie Cox, President and CEO of the Augusta Metro Chamber of Commerce. Sorry.
I'm Madison Stevens with the Administrator's Office.
Hi, I'm Tina Slendak, District 7 Commissioner.
Okay, all right, so we're going to get started. This is going to really be open dialogue. Commissioner Guilfoyle, I had down for him to actually tell us where his focus was as far as the moratorium was concerned, but I feel like he's done that already. Some of the notes that I took, and I'm sure others at the table took, were the reasons for the moratorium to be able to attract big box stores and rooftops. That was one of the things, because possibly having multi-units is not going to necessarily attract the same type of businesses, as well as longevity of apartment complexes, how they look over time. And I heard him say that that may be due to property management, and also that was really the two major things. How do we, was there something else that I missed, Commissioner Guilfoyle?
No, I mean, I don't have a problem with townhomes, patio homes whatsoever. It's the apartment complex. Townhome, patio homes need to be owner occupied.
Okay, so let's go through, and I want to start with pros first. So pros to a moratorium. What would the pros to having a moratorium be? And you can raise your hand, I guess, are we gonna take the mic around? Jeff is gonna be so kind as to help get the mic around the room. But if we could just start the conversation with pros to a moratorium.
Thank you. The one pro is it should help the current apartment rental rates go up, which lags behind in our, not just Augusta, but this area. We'd really like to see those rental rates increase. That may help.
If the goal of Augusta is to bring in large box stores and certain businesses, they need to understand how those businesses make decisions, and it's extrapolated off of data. And if you're trying to redistribute the socioeconomic composition of South Augusta into a way that would bring in the correct data to send the signals to these companies to invest here, halting apartment complexes is a very good hypothesis for doing so. I know that the types of people that rent apartment buildings attract Dollar Generals and Family Dollars and other very large carnivorous corporate interests that we would like to keep out of Augusta, and I think it would be a good idea.
No other pros, okay? So next, we're going to have the cons of moratoriums. If you could raise your hand, that would be great. So then you get to the mic.
All right, so from a builder and developer standpoint, we are always concerned when the word moratorium comes up because we're concerned in general of government control over the private sector. And that's not necessarily targeting what you're going after, Commissioner Guilfoyle, but just as a general comment. I mean, you and I have had some time to talk about this, and I understand a lot of your points, and I don't disagree necessarily. But again, from a private sector standpoint, more government control is always a concern when we're looking at projects. Also, there's a concern of the value of property. If I'm a property owner and I have a 15-acre tract that's got great visibility, great access, and now I can't sell it for apartment use, and my property's just been devalued by, I mean, we can pay double, triple, quadruple for apartment land than we can for residential housing land. So you take that backwards and see how much value a property owner has just lost.
Echoing what you took my first point, the word moratorium in our industry, we just don't like the word. It's not good business. But also, I hear it all the time wherever I go. It's like, why can't we be downtown Greenville? Why can't we be? And if you look at downtown Greenville, that is all high-density, multifamily downtown that drives their economic impact in the downtown Greenville region. All the retail that's there, all the restaurants, all the activities, there's no single family homes in that downtown corridor compared to multifamily. So just, what is multifamily? Is it just apartment complexes? But once you start saying multifamily, that's quads, that's townhomes, all of that gets wrapped up together. I mean, ultimately, as builders and developers, we want everyone to own a home, but in this day and time, with the price to buy a new home and the cost to build, sometimes that prices families out of being able to buy something. So we need to provide housing for anyone and everyone, and give roofs over their heads.
Samuel Miller, Water Department. One of the challenges that we're sort of looking at when we've been observing this discussion, at least from a drafting angle, is that the terms that have been used have been somewhat imprecise and combine a whole lot of concepts. Our zoning code doesn't know what an apartment complex is, and our zoning code doesn't differentiate between, not really, to the extent that has been asked, between owner-occupied and rented properties. There are build-to-rent restrictions in other municipalities in Georgia, but our zoning code, and Director Delaney can discuss this, is sort of nested extensions of how dense it is as a measurement. And so when the concept has been discussed, apartment complexes, that won't fit into how we have the law as currently if we just use the term apartment complexes. So if the commission or this government wanted to drill down on that concept, as it stands here, it's going to have to define a density number, as well as make a differentiation between, as Commissioner Mayor Pro Tem Guilfoyle had just mentioned, the difference between townhouses are okay, but apartment complexes are not, because these are mostly owner-occupied and these are not. That differentiation also has to be sort of indicated. So it's a little bit of a, the will of the body sort of matching what our current ordinances say now, as well as there's been discussion of a geographic distinction. What that definition is going to be also has to be sort of let out with some specificity, not only for us approving as to whether or not this particular application meets the moratorium, but for y'all, so that the results that you're looking for, that is a certain sort of ban in a certain sort of area, actually gets accomplished from the words that you use.
Yeah, let me reply. In regards to downtown looking like Greenville, in my first statement, it was to be District 1 to be exempt, because that's where the millennials are moving to. Now, one of the gentlemen in the back has stated where if we don't build apartment complexes, the rent goes up, which is good. But I believe with the Planning and Zoning Department that I'd like to try to figure out how Columbia County had implemented a moratorium, but now it's done expired. But North Augusta just implemented one. It's not only, really, I guess the word I should have used is pause, to where we could capture exactly how many apartment complexes with how many units versus how many houses we have in the area. Naturally, we'd rather see rooftops for one reason. That's what it attracts. If we had realtors here, the realtors should get a better understanding that rooftops, number one, it builds the area. It, as long as it's controlled growth, it does. As far as complementing area, we had Mr. Joe come up to us last year with a beautiful neighborhood subdivision, $300,000 or so, but it got turned down on this floor. And that's a shame, because that would have attracted restaurants, that would have attracted box stores, and would actually had us focus more on putting infrastructure in South Richmond County, because that's the only place that growth could happen. But again, I'm still waiting on the plan and zoning to give us the amount of units versus how many houses we have. So we could actually start move from there, co-chair, on what the merits was going to be as far as how many houses we have versus how many units we have. Because it's going to be a shame when we have more units than we do have houses. So we have to look at it from that as well. Look at other communities, not only the size of Augusta, Richmond County, but other communities that's even smaller. Let's say 100,000 residents in there. So let's look at it from that perspective as well. We might just need to look at just putting a pause instead of using the word moratorium until we get a grip on what we do have.
I believe Ms. Cox was gonna, you had a comment? She was gonna grab her microphone and she'll go for it next.
That's okay. I was going to comment and not necessarily say this was a con, but I do think that this needs to be more of a data-driven discussion, to the gentleman's point back there. When speaking about rooftops, we discovered, we were doing some research on HB 491, about half of the homesteads are not owner-occupied. So that would be, they could fall into multifamily, or they could fall into duplex or townhomes or what have you. So I think it needs to be more of a data-driven discussion, because we certainly, as a chamber, don't want to put a halt, maybe a pause, a moratorium, whatever you want to call it, on any type of developmental growth that could support our workforce. That's a huge need, and workforce housing, income-aligned housing, whatever you want to call that as well, is a huge need, and that's across the county, I would say across the region. So, and I can speak from experience. I've looked for a home in the past 6 months, and there's a shortage really across the board, but I think that data is really going to be what needs to drive the decisions made in regards to multifamily or for new or increased development.
So for me, that's exactly, it's workforce development and actually looking at the data. Because as a realtor, I want to sell homes. But the problem is that in Richmond County, we don't have a lot of move-in ready homes that are actually starter homes. So that's the problem, is that we need the employees to keep our workforce going. Savannah Riverside is needing temporary housing to support what they have going on there. They're begging for rentals. And so before we start putting a pause on things, let's actually look at the data as to what people can afford. And then I think what we need to do is actually make adjustments to our zoning ordinances so that we can allow the housing, so that we can meet that demand. Because I think as an area, we all want that affordable house that our first-time homebuyers can actually buy. Because right now in America, our first-time homebuyer is 38 years old. Because that's how long it takes them to save in order to be able to buy. So if we take away the rentals, which most rentals for a one-bedroom in the county right now are around $1,200 a month. And that's before fees and utilities. Mine, when I went through a divorce, I lived right next to ADP, was $1,415 a month. With fees, it was $1,535 plus utilities. So the scary thing is you can't take that $1,535 and go buy a move-in ready house in most of the CSRA. So if you take away the one housing opportunity they have, then we're going to start losing our development opportunities.
Ms. Lopez? Right
To Liz's point that she just made, that is very much true. Right now in South Augusta, we only have 14 homes that are available for rent right now. If somebody was coming here and wanting to find a property, and they range from $1,200 minimum to $2,100, and that's for 3 bedrooms or more. And then for 2 bedrooms or more, we only have 2 properties that are available right now in South Augusta. So our inventory is very, very, very low. And a lot of it has to do too with the hurricane as well, and houses being inundated with that, the damages from that. But right now, Fort Eisenhower, the other plants that are right now, I think it's industrial that's coming up, there's going to be a lot more people coming into the CSRA that needs homes. And this is our inventory right now. So if we don't have that to provide to them, then they need to have something, some type of apartments to be able to live temporarily. You have a lot of people that are military that are here just for like TDY. They need something for 6 months to a year. You know, again, I'm real estate, I want you to buy, but they need to have some place for their families to go. Right now, BAH for a sergeant E5 is $1,785 a month right now. For RE/MAX, where I work for, and I do property management, I have 48 properties, but you gotta make 3 times the rent amount, no recent collections, in order to even be, qualified to be able to rent. And then this is our inventory that we have to show to them. So we definitely, I think that the moratorium We don't need to do that because we need to be able to provide more properties for these people to live and not increase the homelessness in Augusta.
I'd like to add, if I could. My name is Joe Fells. I'd like to preface this by saying I have skin on all sides of this. I'm a builder and electrician in multiple states. I own and rent over 50 properties in Richmond County and have over a decade. I've been flipping houses. I own a real estate brokerage. I own 8 LLCs based out of this county. So, you know, I see all sides. And part of the problem is nobody's catching the people that are falling through the cracks. Because y'all want people to rent something, but then they can never get ahead because they're always renting. But you want them to buy something, but it's too expensive. Y'all need to allow tiny homes. Duh. You need to provide an option for people to buy something affordably, because now in 2025, people realize they don't want nor need a big house. They're 25-year-old, they don't want to rent. Why? Because they're just throwing their money away, but they can't buy. But they need to have a place where they can get started. It used to exist in America. I own a lot of these 1950s houses. They were all 792 square feet with a single car garage. And they were designed for a family of 4. Look where we are now. You can't even build something under 800 square feet in Richmond County. I personally think that you should allow homeowners to build an affordable rental unit in their backyard so people could invest in the one asset they have. Like a normal person could say, hey, we're going to build something in our backyard. We own it. We can pull a permit ourselves. They can inspect it, and then we can invest here. And nobody's going to rent to a deadbeat in their backyard, let's be honest. There's a million ways that you could skin this cat if you just approach the problem a little differently. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, just to echo what a lot of people are saying too in the Richmond County. I started flipping houses in Richmond County when I got stationed here in '99. Did a lot of stuff too. But the thing about housing, when you start talking these big complexes, some of them got gyms in it, some of them talk about putting daycare in it. And a lot of these soldiers at Fort Gordon, they like that. They like to be together in one complex to leverage everything. If you stop the big building, then the slum laws who own the little places, they can force them there. I don't think companies would invest millions of dollars in building these big complexes. Like on Whitechapel Road, even the Gate 5, they first built that big complex back there. I hate to say that, I said to myself, this thing's never gonna rain. It rained pretty quickly. It was very convenient, had a lot of stuff going on there. These other ones on Gordon Highway coming out. And a lot of times you might want to talk to Ms. Mary Scott at Fort Gordon Housing. I think she's still the manager of the off-post housing. And she'll tell you, soldiers are excited about taking 2 or 3 traffic lights to work without a lot of traffic. And so if you force them to downtown, you force them to Columbia County, because that's the only thing available, then I think Richmond County will lose. And also you can quote places like Walmart, neighborhood Walmart. I mean, you put an apartment complex downtown with these soldiers, average income, I would say E4 with a family, probably $50,000. Walmart looks at that, and they like to go to the stores downtown. And so you have to make everything work and stop you gotta let the free market do what the free market does. And one of the biggest things I think too, if you want to get housing in Augusta, you have a very good program called the NAPA program. They underfunded, it's hard to do, they're the best mortgage program in the world. And Richmond County will now decide, look, I'm gonna put 2 positions in there inside the NACA and embed them to help do the process and help do the NACA. A lot of banks don't like that because they're not making the type of money they want to make. And the NACA counselors don't make the type of money the big lenders make. But it's a great program. But one thing what NACA will tell you, their job is to make sure that they keep their home. They're not like a traditional bank where you go and you get behind and the bank takes your house. NACA is going to restructure that thing. It's going to look at it. I've had homes I sold to NACA that people got divorced and they cut the payment in half for 2 years to keep their homes. So leverage what you have, let the free market move forward, and Richmond County will continue to be a place of excellence. I mean, it's looking nice right now, all the new things going on.
I kind of agree with what that gentleman is saying. I think the market should drive what we do. The problem I think you're not seeing for housing, for that matter, is why would I want to live here when I could live across the river a little bit cheaper for the same house? Now, I developed in South Carolina, in South Richmond County, and in Columbia County, and we are actually heading out further away for our developments into McDuffie and possibly in other areas. I think you need to look at what starts it. You want to build affordable housing, and it's real simple. You talked about a mortgage, I believe a mortgage program. Is that mortgage program any good? Will it help somebody if it's a $350,000 starter home? You've got to start with your code, your development code. You want to build, not want to say inexpensive, but workforce housing or affordable housing or attainable housing, whatever term of the year you want to use, you got to start with the base, the development code. If you can't, we got to be able to work that in order to bring that price. Give me some density. That would be one way to do it. If you're not going to, allow me to do 3 or 4 per acre. If you want open space, we can be creative. You got to let us do that. You can't dictate that and say, well, we want 20% open space. Let me work that and show you what we can do or what Jason can do in our developments to give you what you need to do. If you can reduce the amount of road, I put in a real good example. You got a 60-foot right of way. 60 foot. It's the only municipality that has that. Everybody else is at 50. If I try to go to 50, which is doable, the fire department will have a baby because they can't get their fire trucks down the road. Now, I've driven fire trucks. I was a lieutenant up north. I get a fire truck down any road. And that's why that big bumper is there. But that's part of it. A smaller right-of-way, smaller road, it saves money. It gives us a chance to bring down that price of that land, that per lot cost, when it's sold to a builder. He can bring down his price. Those are 2 things I really think you need to look at.
You're gonna get a workout too.
I can play ball tonight, so I'm getting used to that.
Mr. Joe is with Beasley Home, one of the biggest builders in Augusta, Richmond County, Columbia County, Aiken County, and I respect what you just said. My goal is to find out ways and incentives to help the builder build houses. That's it. If we got planted zone correct there, how can we reduce the exposure from 60 feet down to 50 feet? And it works in other counties. Why can't it work here in Augusta, Richmond County? So that'll be a next step we need to look at, because again, you are willing to build houses. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to help you. I'll work with you to get a path forward. And I think you'll have the colleagues here as well on the same mission statement. My problem that I see, we had Goshen, they wanted to put housing or multi-units on a one-way street. Well, it didn't pass. They asked for a the variance. I apologize, my mind went blank on that one. So naturally, they couldn't build. But the whole time, the builder actually reached out to me on the 11th hour. It was actually about 11:15 that Tuesday before I was coming here. Asked me if he could push it off. Well, it's already been through planning and zoning and failed. They had a whole room full of the people from Goshen. And naturally, you ain't going to go against the residents, number one. So his whole thing was, we can't make money. Sometimes what you got to do is look out what's best for the community as well. Instead of looking at your own pocket, let's look at what's best for the community. what's our goal 10 years, 15, 20 years from now? That we, you know, I hear a lot of people that like to see a lot more apartment complexes so we can rent out. But if you don't build as many apartment complexes and you work with the developers to build more houses, that helps everybody in return. And it actually helps Augusta 10, 15 years from now. Now, I will say this, the Housing Authority, they build a beautiful complex as well. It's usually gated though now, which is good. It keeps, you know, I do like y'all's concept. But anyway, Ms. Joe, I'll be happy to work with you.
Well, you know, while I got the room together, I have a question. What is a good, healthy housing mix? Because we talk about letting the free market kind of take place. I have a concern with Richmond County multifamily housing units outpacing single-family housing units. To me, that creates a problem as we try to grow Richmond County to the place to want to work, live, and play. And if someone can answer that question, just what do you, in your opinion, what is a good, healthy housing mix? Because I've heard that once you start outpacing your apartments with homeownership, it creates a problem as to how we grow the county. I look at our neighbors, not to use them as a barometer, but certainly want to make sure that one, we're providing affordable housing. As Commissioner Guilfoyle mentioned, I think the Augusta Housing Authority does that as well as some others. But when I look at some of the developments that are occurring primarily out in the South Richmond corridor, if you look at our mission to provide affordable housing, most of these units don't have access to transportation. Even though you have lower rents, how do you get to the jobs? I've heard that. Our office has been inundated with people that move out in Peach Orchard Road in complexes that are in lands that traditionally, I don't know if it was a cheap land cost, but they're building them everywhere. And these people are complaining they don't have transportation now. So how do I access services and jobs? So someone who's in apartments, anybody, you tell me what's a fair, healthy mix of apartment units versus single-family homes. And I see a hand back there.
So she, Miss,
Pick a name.
I was gonna do your last name. I love that. To be appropriate.
Hey, I'm Bernadette Kelleher, and I'm with Augusta Habitat for Humanity. And so I've been listening and taking in everything everyone's saying, and I think these are all great points, and I'm thrilled that you brought up transportation. We've had land offered to be donated to us, and I'm like, I gotta figure out the transportation out there. So it's wonderful if you want to build out here, but how are they gonna get through their jobs? When our transportation cuts off at 5 or 6 p.m. and the mall doesn't close till 9, how are they getting home from their jobs? So those are great points, but I don't think that answer can happen today. I think what this committee should be doing is multi-use, multi-income developments, and it needs to be planned. I think that's wonderful that you want to do that. I think we can provide, I like to call it accessible housing rather than affordable, because nothing's truly affordable, but Habitat has unique ways of working. I think your points were fantastic. Everyone has good points based on their point of view. But what would serve this committee well is to start actually planning what would that development look like, rather than just saying, hey, you want to build that, you should go build it. The cities that thrive, I started with Habitat 2.5 years ago, and I have been exploring multi-use, multi-income housing in almost every city where there's a successful Habitat, which is almost every city, I'm just gonna put that out there. But in doing that, what I've learned is the successful cities are planned, right? They're planning that development in a way that brings to the table transportation, accessible housing, retail, apartments, multi-use, quads, duplexes. We can't just sit here and have a conversation and then turn loose. If we don't turn it into a plan, we're wasting our time. We are the second largest city in Georgia. We need to be thinking like that. We need to be saying, how do we come to the table and do better? And I think that it's wonderful that we're doing this, but it has to be planned, and every voice needs to be at the table. The transportation, that's the first time I heard it brought up. And to me, that's one of the most important things we need to be doing as a city, is planning. If you build houses and there's no transportation there, you're wasting your time. Because those houses are gonna have to be the $350,000, $400,000 houses. $1,200 worth of rent a month is a $48,000 a year salary. The average salary in Augusta, Georgia right now is $27,000. Keep that in mind when you're going through this. We have over 8,600 shortages of homes already. Our workforce development is short. So you can call it any title you want, but if we don't start planning for the people who currently live here, they are going to start moving out. And then what's Richmond County going to do? We need to learn not only how to expand, but to how to maintain the people who are already here. And that requires thought and a process and a plan. That's it.
Thank you. I appreciate the kind words about the work we do at the Housing Authority. One of the comments I'd like to make is just that there's always going to be a place for those kind of rentals. Not everybody will ever be set up to be able to purchase a house. Doesn't matter the cost, and those are the population that we normally deal with. One of the numbers I'd like to throw out there is, as of today, we have over 24,000 families on our various waiting lists for assisted housing or affordable housing. And those incomes range from zero all the way up to $93,000 for a family of 8 is still considered low income in Richmond County. And I know a lot of people say $93,000, but if you have a large family, that's not enough to live, to be able to buy a house in this area. Just a few weeks ago, we opened up a waiting list for the new apartments on called the Lennox, and in 4 days, we had over 1,000 applications just for a subset of 20 of those units. A couple of years ago, last year, we opened up our waiting list for Section 8, and in 4 days, we had 12,300 applicants for that waiting list. So there's a tremendous need for some sort of rental housing. And I just want to caution you that any type of pause or moratorium on rental housing that affects the housing that we provide can have a very detrimental effect on the population that we serve. So just please keep that in mind as you're going through this process.
So, to Bernadette's and yours point, just want to share a few data points with you. So in 2016 until the end of last year, the increase in mortgage payments have increased 172%. Okay? The cost of a home has gone up 73%. 28 to 32% of the cost of a single family home is due to government regulations, zoning ordinances, building codes, building standards, land costs, DHEC permit fees if you're in South Carolina, or Army Corps of Engineers if you're in Georgia. But before any of these builders here can even build a home, they're already assessed a 28 to 32% cost. But wages from 2016 till this year have only increased about 10%. So you talk about where there is a mix-up, it's really about wages. And the elephant in the room for Richmond County is your schools. I'm disappointed not to see someone here from the school district at this meeting because that's important. Schools drive where people want to live. I mean, I've been here for a little over 8 years, and the first thing I did when we got orders to come here from the military is look at the best schools, because I have 3 school-age children. That dictates where families build. Crime, all the things. Everybody looks at that when they're coming to build a home. So to say all that, to answer your question, Mr. Mayor, is you have to give these builders and developers that do this day in and day out room to be creative, to make housing for everyone. And that might look a little different, what people aren't used to seeing. There might be some multi-family units where quads are in the front and some small, tiny home type in the middle, and then some bigger homes in the back. But right now, the zoning, all of the ordinances that y'all have don't allow that creativity. Because at the end of the day, the more houses that the builders and developers can get on land, the lower the cost of housing can be. These guys aren't getting richer, their margins haven't, building costs have shot up, you know, we have lumber costs, concrete costs, but it's really that government regulations that you all can change or you know, work around so that we can get housing. I'll use this story. About 4 years ago, I was at a National Association of Home Builders conference in Orlando, and they put us, about 600 of us on buses, and took us to this neighborhood when Disney moved out right outside of Orlando, and a developer came in there and built this neighborhood, and it was beautiful. It had multifamily rental units in the front, it had commercial development, and then inside the neighborhood, it had 2-bedroom, 2-bath homes under 1,000 square feet, and it might have 2 of those, and then 3 houses down, there was a $800,000 home. And when we came through there, it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they created some been real creative with green space, creating courtyards like in between the houses where the houses were kind of stacked. And guess what? All of those kids were playing in that green space together. It didn't matter that one of them lived in a $200,000 house and the one next door lived in an $800,000. You talk about creating community, and it was phenomenal. And I have said that 100 times, told this story, but they allowed, that city outside of Orlando allowed those developers to be creative, because Disney's biggest thing is, it's not just the executives that they needed to build housing for. They needed to build from the people who vacuum the carpet and work the security desk. And now, guess what? They all live in one neighborhood, in one community, and they all look out for each other. And that's what we need to do here in Augusta, because it's not just soldiers. Our soldiers need housing. A lot of these soldiers are on one income, very limited resources. Everybody thinks just because you're in the military you can live wherever you want. That's not true, because it's, especially when you're on one income, if you have kids that are in daycare, I mean, the expenses go on and on and on. So we need to provide that sense of community, and we have land in the areas, but we need to address all of the issues so that people will want to buy and want to build, because all of these builders, if they can't sell the houses, they're not going to build them.
And Mr. Mayor, I think there's no easy way for us to actually answer your question. Because number one, there are some things that we don't even have the data on yet. So even though we're in the industry, we don't really know how many single-family livable homes we actually have. We don't really know how many multifamily homes are actually owner-occupied versus how much of them are getting rented. I think there needs to actually be a study on that before you actually start making any major decisions or major moves in that, before you start making your zoning changes, before you start looking at your transportation. Because from my experience, most of the transportation in Augusta, Richmond County is only in certain areas. And you don't have land to build those houses in those areas. So for us to then meet that demand, you then have to expand your transportation. So do we even have the infrastructure in Augusta, Richmond County to do that? Like, that's the data that I would really love to see and dug into, and then we can really, as Ms. Bernadette was saying, make a good plan and get everybody what it is that they're looking for.
Can we hear from the director on these issues?
Yes, I was going to actually direct questions to her. Yeah, Thank you. Director Delaney, I know that at one point, well, we still are in the midst of talking about reviewing our ordinance. So we're still in the process of that. Can you kind of just give us a little update on what that looks like?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. How's everybody doing? Good to see you all. So in 2024, we began the process of updating our zoning ordinance. One of the things that we wanted to tackle with our zoning ordinance is the density, because a lot of times you can get to where you need to be from a residential standpoint with increased density. And we have designed our community as though it was still rural, and those requirements have been in existence and somewhat hindered some types of development. So the zoning ordinance as a whole hasn't been updated in probably about 20 years. It's been piecemeal updated. So we're doing it as a comprehensive update overhaul to the whole thing. One of the biggest things that I'm advocating for with the current update is for us to embrace more mixed use and mixed income housing. We have to be intentional about what we want to do and how we want the city to look. So this process started, we had a kickoff meeting in November. Some of the people in here were there. We've had several meetings throughout the community where we are going out into the community and meeting with individuals and groups. We have a steering committee, which some people here at the table are on, and we also have focus groups. So this project, as far as a research standpoint, for our zoning ordinance, it will span all the way through, I would say about September, August, September, and then we'll be writing and the draft will come before the commission in November. But over the course of this, before we even got to the point where we were working on the zoning ordinance in 2023, we did the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan broke the county out into what we call character areas. And we looked at those corridors that are central to transportation, work-related and health-related activities. And we were intentional about making sure that we proposed that the future land use in those sectors was compatible, that it was along a transit route and things of that nature. Transit-oriented developments are something that we want to pursue too. So from our comprehensive plan, which lays the foundation for what we would like our future land use to be, to the zoning ordinance updates, we're going along the line that's best for planning and being intentional about the design and the future of the city. So that's part of that. There was so much that was said, so I want to make sure I get to the right point. So that's the first one.
Yes, as far as the ordinance is concerned, that is the first one. You can just freely talk about the points that were made that you can address.
All right. So a couple of the other things that that came up, we were talking about apartments in general, and this goes back to the foundation. So I'll make references to how you start is essential. We talked about the comprehensive plan, which has to come first, and that gives us the ability to make the zoning ordinance. Within the zoning ordinance, we have to be very specific and intentional about how we're going to define apartments. Apartments in and of themselves are just a place where you can cook, clean yourself, and sleep. That is an apartment. If you're saying you don't want multi-story apartments, that's something else. If you're saying you don't want more than 75 units or 30 units, there are different ways to define what an apartment is. So going back to your foundation, what do you decide you don't want to see? When you say you don't want to see apartment complexes, what are you talking about? Are you talking about, because there are one-story, we call them townhomes, one-story townhomes, and they're classified as apartments though. So when you go behind, I'll give an example, a concrete example. If you go behind, off of Wheeler Road, there's a whole lot of one-story apartments / townhomes. Are we saying we don't want to see that? Or are we saying we don't want to see the multi-story stacked? There's some definition that needs to go on. What don't you want to see when it comes to multifamily housing? We need that as a starting point for a department to move forward. In addition to that, we have about 88 licensed apartment complexes, 88 in the county. That's approximately. Because some people, they call their townhomes, they don't call them apartments. So from a definition standpoint, you get back into the mud of what is an apartment versus a townhome versus a multifamily versus a duplex and a quad. And is it a rental unit or is it an apartment if the owner occupies one side of the duplex? So there's some nuance to what we're talking about here. In addition to that, we have, and I'm going to give you a range. On purpose, I'm giving you a range because as we start delving into the data, what we find is people who are defining townhomes, apartments, multifamily, they're all using different terminology, okay? And so it's not a universal language or one word, so to speak. So we looked at it, it's roughly between 26 and 31,000 rental units that are labeled as apartments, okay? Labeled as apartments. That doesn't mean that there aren't more, but it's how you define it. If you had a apartment complex, say for instance, from the 1980s, 1990s, that was all in the county, then when you consolidate it, now you have, you called it some type of homes, you may not have updated it. It might genuinely still be called the homes at, the residences at, and things of that nature. So you have to work through some of those definitions. In addition to that, I think one of the other questions that was asked, or it's all running together a little bit, but in the last 2 years and what we have under construction right now is about 4 apartment complexes right now that are already in the site plan review process, okay? I mean, the architectural plan review process. And then we have about 6 more that are in the site plan review process, okay? So with that being said, you know, I want to make sure I'm answering your question, because there's been a lot. So if you have something very pointed, I want to make sure I get it. But just as an overall or in summary, we want to make sure we start with the basic. What is it about the apartments you don't want? Is it the rental component, or is it the type of building structure that you have concerns about? And then we can move into how to come up with a remedy.
Director Delaney, thank you, Mayor Johnson. A specific question to what you just stated, and I believe someone talked about, I believe it was Ms. Heitzman, that talked about how areas look and how you should be free to be creative. In other counties, or Greenville was mentioned, in cities that look like Greenville and cities that look similar to Greenville, was there actually a plan in place? And then, and when I say plan, as we are reviewing our ordinance and we're reviewing where we can build multi-units, where we can have industrial, all of those things, does there actually need to be a plan in place that is a directive or a suggestion from you to us? This is what this plan should look like. And then we as a body agree upon that plan. That way, yes, you can still be creative in your building, but then we have the communities, like the community she described, where there was multi-units, retail space, single-family homes, everything is coexisting. I want to say that unless a developer just owned that much land, which is very possible, so I'm not denouncing that. However, the municipality at some point has to say, this is what the plan is for these areas, be it South Augusta, downtown, District 2, District 7. This is what the plan is for these areas, and then we move forward with that plan and development. Is that incorrect, or can you speak to that? Because we want to get to that plan, and that's kind of what I heard Mayor Johnson in his questioning, like, how do we get to that?
So, there's several ways you can get to it, but I want to say, even in the current environment, in our current zoning ordinance, there is an avenue for pursuit of ideas, because we're never going to capture every single scenario. But the reason we have within our zoning ordinance what we call planned unit development is because it allows for that creativity. It allows for you to be more fluid. And it also allows for you to adjust for things such as density, design, and things of that nature, open space. So there is already within our current ordinance an opportunity to be creative. It's not shot, it's not gone, it's not something you have to wait on. In addition to that, since my tenure in the department, I've met with most of the developers who would like to do something different, and we give them avenues to do something different. More importantly, we advocate that those who actually make the decisions open their minds a little bit more. I mean, we had a builder at the table for multiple months to do a single-family detached residential development off of Tobacco Road. And we say we wanted residential development. We worked tirelessly for hours with them on this, and we brought it before the commission multiple times, and it did not get approved. So when we say we want single family and we bring single family, it didn't get approved. You say you don't, that's not what we want. But then multifamily, we bring that, we don't want that. There is a lack of consistency that's taking place about whether or not you really want the development they're saying they want. So the current ordinance already has the PUD. The revised ordinance or the upcoming ordinance that we plan to update will have more options too. The comprehensive plan also lends itself to the mixed use and mixed income development in almost every single zone.
But I think and you answered my questions, however, the planned communities. So when we're looking at, because Greenville again was brought up, the actual planned communities within Augusta, Richmond County. And so since we're talking about South Augusta, I want to use that just in my example. But where does that plan come from? This is what we are going to do in this quadrant of South Augusta. Be it build a ball field, and then have multi-units behind it, have single-family homes. This is what we want it to look like. Does the governing body have any say-so in that, or is that totally left up to developers?
Absolutely, that is the zoning process. The reason you do, and I want to say this about plans, because almost everyone in this room has sat on a board or a committee to create a plan, and then that plan sits on a shelf. So you can tie yourself so closely to a plan that you can miss progress, okay? But the PUD, the planned unit development, specifically speaks to the fact that you can go in and design 50 acres or 500 acres to have all of this in one development. Now, could we do a master plan? Yes, you do a master plan, but I want to bring an example to you. How many of you are familiar with industrial parks? That's when the government decided that this plot of land will only be used a certain way. And how many of you seen about 50% of them sitting empty? A lot. You can't get so married to a concept that you won't embrace something new. So you can go down the road of we'll put this plan in place and only pursue this, but then when an opportunity comes along for you to develop it, you can't because you've fallen in love and married the idea that it can only be one thing. There is a mixed-use development opportunity within the current zoning ordinance. There's a planned unit development opportunity within the current ordinances, which allows for you to have commercial and residential at different scales within the development. It already exists. It's just a matter of making sure that one, we bring the right developer to the table, and two, when the developer shows up with the product you specifically asked for, please approve it.
Director Delaney, you mentioned something very important, very insightful. You mentioned there's 4 units that are under plan review, 6 under site review. How many units does that include?
Okay, back.
Just give me an average. Give me a round. You don't have to be exact.
I would say about 425.
How does that compare to our single-family construction?
Our single-family construction, last year we did around 300 single-family construction.
And that's the problem I have.
But let me...
because I'm going to make it clear. Right now, Aiken County outpaces us in single-family residential growth. Over 1,000 permits. Over 1,000. How many?
1,335 Aiken County did last year.
All right, come on with Columbia County.
Columbia County, 804.
Edgefield County.
Edgefield County, 225.
And Richmond County?
391.
That's paltry. I'm going to sit there and tell you, that's paltry for us for Richmond County. That's a concern. We're being outpaced by apartments. At some point, that will be detrimental to our community unless we address it.
Well, I can see, the problem is you have developers and builders bring.
Looks like we got to
I couldn't agree with you more.
Very good. All right. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, we all want to build houses, and we all want to sell houses, and we all want to reap the benefits of our retail and restaurants. But again, builders and developers keep bringing projects, and they have gotten voted down. And that's where, and there are people that voted against the builders and the developers. And I know there's some commercial real estate people in here, you know, after you kind of get a bad taste in your mouth when you keep getting turned down and you go elsewhere, and that's where we've seen Aiken County explode. Now McDuffie County is the new hotspot. Who would have ever thought 10 years ago that Edgefield County would be a place, but it's happening. Barnwell County is next because they are inviting us to the table. They are welcoming us with open arms and sitting down and trying to figure out how can we make this work. And we haven't always gotten that welcome here. And it's from the elected side who makes the final decisions. Carla and her department have always sat down with us, brought us to the table, but it's the elected officials who continue to vote against us because they have a small pocket of people who are misinformed.
Now let's reverse that. How many multifamily units are being developed in those other communities versus single-family residents?
So if you're watching the news, the city of North Augusta, after 40 years, and really the last 10 years, but for 40 years has been working on that development on Exit 5 that you can see clearly. And it's going to be a great development, but it has multifamily. It's going to have about 300 rental units, apartments, condos with dog parks, lounges, I mean, the works. But it's also going to have single-family homes, and it's going to have commercial. And it is going to be a great development, and it's going to be very visible and very, for people who work at SRS or downtown here at the hospitals or at Fort Eisenhower, they literally make 2 turns out of their neighborhood and are on the interstate to work.
Thank you, Ms. Tiffany. This question is directed for the director. Mr. Laney, as far as you've been working on the ordinance since 2023 to make it more compatible with the developers' needs and wants, is that correct?
Lost my banner.
We work on it every month.
Okay, but as far as what Mr. Joe had said about reducing the exposure, the way we could do more houses, build more houses versus apartment complexes, because it's all individual. That's all it boils down to, is how we can get best use out of a piece of property and retain the profit. There's not a sin about making a profit by any means. I'm in the business for myself as well. But as far as making it to where we can make it friendlier for developers to come in to where it's cost efficient, to where we could reduce their exposure as far as the road from 60 feet down to 50 feet. Other counties, other communities have it to where their fire trucks is no smaller or bigger than what we have. How do we change that ordinance there, or policy, to where we could help the developers? I know that it's not only that one issue as far as 60 feet down to 50 feet, there's probably a lot more to that we could work with the developers, builders, etc. So is that a possibility we can move forward on?
I would say that the commission has the ability to designate the width of the right-of-way. What you want to be mindful of is that the Planning and Development Department didn't recommend that right-of-way width per se. That was done at the behest of engineering and the fire department. So you want to make sure you're talking and engaging the entities that do the work within the roads, the utilities, and things of that nature too. So the full commission could, yes, say that there's a 50-foot right-of-way requirement, not a 60-foot right-of-way requirement.
Okay, I'll put that on the agenda, as well as this has to do with engineering as far as they require concrete pipes underneath the driveways, etc., where even GDOT doesn't even require that stiff, high-level expectation. Some reason Augusta Richmond County does, which again, it costs the end user. The builder's going to buy it, the developer's going to purchase it as well, and the cost passed on to the end user, which is the homeowner purchasing the property. So that's two of the things that had came up in the past. I came before me that we need to address as well. My thing is, we've got to make it user-friendly for these developers, builders, etc., to where they would want to build in Augusta, Richmond County. It's a shame, Tiffany, the numbers that you gave us, it's a shame, as big as Augusta is, we're not working or trying to find ways to work with the developers, home builders, etc., to where they would want to build here. And that's what my goal is, my mission. And the gentleman in the hat wanted to speak about 5 minutes ago before the mayor spoke.
Yes, sir.
Tiffany, right here.
But the mayor asked a specific question, and I was trying to answer that very question. Because if you're trying to figure out what this is just business on a large scale. All we're doing is moving money. Okay? What you have right now is what you need to think about is the signaling that you're looking for whatever development it is, whether you want to put in box stores, whether you want single family, whatever it is, there's a monetary signal there, income level. All right, so once you determine what income level you want to put in there, then you need to extrapolate data to see what it is right now. And then after that, you can very easily draw a roadmap by looking at rental rates for 1, 2, 3 bedroom homes, and then the grading criteria that management companies use to qualify people. So you can do a deduction to get your data down where basically this is how much this person makes a month, and so this is how much these have to rent for. Based off of this amount, this is what has to be built there in order to get this person to move there. Okay? And you know, you can do that fairly easily with every single thing you wanted. It's all data. I mean, you know, a blind hog find an acorn every now and again, but not usually. So you got to have real good data to support your decisions. One other thing on your multifamily, you could also keep building multifamily, but change the requirements where they are only available for sale, not rent. That would incentivize the builders to put amenities in there to make people buy it. You can still build your thing, but you are now under the pressure to make this nice enough that somebody will put skin in the game. You know, it's a whole different thing because I'm a huge thing. I'm one of those guys who thinks what I build on my land falls under like the life and liberty and pursuit of happiness section. Like, I own houses from here to Washington State in counties with no building code whatsoever. And it's just kind of weird to be here in my hometown, and Mr. Gillifoyle was correct. I hate building stuff here so bad. I got an 8-acre parcel that was approved for an 80-unit townhome development years ago, and I just got it sitting there. I'm buying a house in Costa Rica. Like, it's just too easy. I do not want to fight tooth and nail in order to work on a house, bro. This is nuts. And so, yeah, if you made it more friendly to us, we might come in here and do work. And if you had really defined goals, we could knock them out, man. It's really easy. You know, things have changed. Now, to buy the breakers for your house, it costs $1,200. It's nuts. And like I said, the chief victim are poor people. And that's why I'm so adamant about it. I'm not here for money. I'm here for something else. And it just affects them. They don't care about an arc fault breaker or tempered glass or a vacuum. They don't care about any of this, man. They just want food on the table. They don't want to be worried about making their rent. And I think that's what you should do.
Director Laney, where is the, you said the 6 apartments, what side of town are they being built in? Is it just covering Augusta, or is it like specifically in South Augusta?
I did the whole county.
Okay, so the whole county. I'm just listening to everybody and kind of, I think we do need to kind of what Angie said, get back to the numbers and the data, but also include all the data. Income, that's very important, as well occupancy, transportation information, understanding education as well. I think, you know, to have this conversation and not understand that data is not gonna serve us well. I know we always wanna focus on economic development. We all want our city to look better, but you wanna also take care of the residents. We don't wanna find ourselves in a Norfolk, Virginia situation where they're trying to get people to come there and buy homes and stay for 5 years or 10 years, and they got incentives that way. But if you listen to the builders and the contractors in the room, and I hear that too, a lot of times they won't come over because it's more business friendly in our neighboring counties. So then we got a multifold situation, not just one thing or the other. So I just think we need to get back to like really the data before we think about moratoriums and those type of things. Because I pause when I'm hearing constantly that the cost of living is too high. And we talk about people in poor, but we're talking about the working class too, guys. We're not just talking about poor people at this point. We're talking about our teachers, we're talking about police officers, we're talking about our educators, and those that are working in a lot of our facilities. So we're gonna keep that in mind, because childcare cost is high. That is impacting everybody. It is people who are working at SRS who are two-income families, and they're trying to figure out how do they go live off of one income so they can begin to build their family. So I just want to make sure we're kind of looking at the whole picture and not just looking at one thing when we're talking about this, because I think this is very critical for the growth of Augusta.
One thing I've noticed, I've been doing this a long time. I know I don't look that old, but I've been doing it a while. One thing I've noticed with government, and it's getting back to working with the department, is the government, when it has a problem, it does one thing, and that's it. It writes a regulation. What I would love to see Augusta do is put together some type of, like a little subcommittee. If there's a problem with utilities, they have an issue of some sort, what is their problem? And how can we, Jason, my group, how can we help solve that problem? A municipality had a problem a few years ago, and what they did was they wrote a regulation that doubled the amount of storm traps. Now, storm trap is not cheap, but that's what happened. Instead of telling us what was the issue, where we could help solve that problem, I would like to see us work on that. You know, and keep in mind for a developer or a builder, I don't get all the money. What we do pays my receptionist, pays my administrator, pays everybody. So we want to do what's best. But the money is still green over in Aiken County. So you've got to find a way to make me want to be here. And we do want to be here. I've got 2 projects on the books in one in South Richmond County. I don't think Powell Road is South Augusta, but the other one, that's yours? Powell Road. Yeah, we're hopefully going to start that one very soon. However, it's going to be very expensive. I've got to get across some wetlands. I have a project in Haines Station. That's one of yours also, and I'll be talking to you soon.
Okay.
Because the city will not take a bridge. I got to cross this wetlands. I'm trying to find another way around it. But what I had heard was the city will not take the bridge. That means it's got to be private. That means the homeowners are going to own it. Is that really what you want to do? But I think if we can put together some group that can investigate and deal with problems to help us out, and I didn't mean it that way, but to help solve the problems the government may have that's causing higher regulations or more money being spent, we can probably solve a lot of these. It's what we do.
Mr. Joe, we actually had a construction advisory committee. I don't know what made it diminish, but it's no longer serving. I guess Mr. Laney could respond to that. I imagine the last time it was going on, Marshall Masters was the one that was overseeing it, but he had since retired. I was hoping somebody would take the flag, but we are going to need the Home Builders Association to help us put the plumbers, the electricians, the framers, the roofers, the infrastructure guys. We all need somebody from every trade to actually bring value to that table. And I think the director, planning and zoning director is usually at the meetings too.
The Construction Advisory Board, it was lean when Marshall Masters was here. More importantly, the Construction Advisory Board is dependent on the Augusta Commission putting people on there who live in Richmond County. And that's been probably the biggest hurdle that I've heard communicated back to us when we have inquired. They're not sure who lives in Richmond County. Because that is one of the requirements for the talent thing form, is that the person live in Richmond County. So there has been conversation loosely about whether or not you can own a business versus live in Richmond County to be on the construction advisory board. As a department head, I'm not at liberty to make that decision or to deviate from that. So as people who have been on the board have either one moved out of the community or are out of the county, or they have decided that it's time to roll off, the replacement, it does not come from the department. But what I will do is I will put together a spreadsheet to provide all of the commissioners with all 7 of the boards and committees that planning and development works with, so that you can know who you got appointments for and who you don't have appointments for. I can do that. I can hand that to you. I can get it before the close of business Friday.
I'd also like to add in, I think Richmond County has a great opportunity right now. Let's talk about some positive things. You talked about, Mayor, your neighboring counties and the growth that is going on there, but some of you may not know, Aiken County is about out of sewer, right? And so they're going to be several years before they have new capacity, all right? So that's going to severely restrict their growth over the next few years. Edgefield County gets their sewer through North Augusta, gets their sewer from Aiken County. So Edgefield County has now already been cut off from sewer. So that what you see, that 200 and something number of permits, probably going to go almost to 0 pretty soon, because Edgefield County, North Augusta's told them no more. North Augusta's apartment moratorium is only on standalone apartments. They still allow apartments anywhere in a PUD, and they also allow, they define up to 4 units not as an apartment. So you can still build what we at Ivy typically build as a townhome style apartment. You can still build that anywhere in North Augusta. So that, I think Richmond County has some great opportunity coming up in the future, very near future, with the challenges that the other counties have coming up. Columbia County just doesn't want us, period, as an industry. So I don't know if you're supposed to say that out loud, but I've been saying it for a couple of years. But it's true. I mean, everybody knows that. So again, it goes back to, I think you're going to see a lot of people looking back in Richmond County. One other thing I would mention, and Commissioner Guilfoyle and Joe mentioned it well, is that it's extremely important for the utilities department and the engineering department to be at the table. Carla and planning are great to work with, in our opinion. I think Joe will say that too. A lot of the regulations there just hamstring them a little bit, in the way they're written, so they work with us as much as possible. But they go by the regulation. In our experience, engineering and utilities have a regulation, and then they have their other rules, and it changes. And so that's where there is a lot of expense that comes into play, and that's where they need to be involved in the discussion on the comprehensive zoning plan. Thank you.
And to piggyback off of what you said while you're passing the mic, there are 3 exemptions, as he pointed out, to North Augusta's moratorium. I actually spoke with the director over there. We went through it. We went through the process and how their commission arrived at this point. In addition to that, I was the subdivision planner over in Aiken County, so I know how they got there. I know how you get to the numbers from a residential standpoint for single-family detached. So it's not as though we don't have the knowledge base and the information here, but what we have to do is make sure that we're looking at the total picture. It's not lost on anyone here that Aiken County actively recruited. They actively, they had marketing and programming just to bring single family in because they had an aging population. They were a retirement community and they were trying to get their numbers up. So they did do things and they marketed and they were more welcoming, creative, proactive in the pursuit of single family detached. And I was there during the boom in Aiken County to help with that process. So it's not smoke and mirrors, it's not magic, but it is just being transparent. If you really want this, then when the opportunity presents itself to get 200 plus homes, let's sit down and have that conversation, not necessarily on the commission floor, but let's talk in a small circle to move the project forward.
Thank you.
One thing we got to be aware of, you brought up the corporate part in your conversation earlier, Starbucks, corporate part. Every lot in there has been sold except for 2. That's going to generate 10,000 jobs. That's going to be great for the developers, the real estate agents, etc. But in order for us to have growth out there, we're going to need infrastructure. We're going to need to make sure that engineering, utilities, planning, zoning, we all user-friendly to these developers. But we're going to put, hopefully, the colleagues going to support this, is to put enough money in SPLOST that's coming up in November to where we can have infrastructure put in, to where we could have development is put in without having to worry about septic tanks. So that's a little something to look forward for our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I believe this was a great start, and I'm intentionally using the word start because I heard everyone very loudly say this is the beginning of a conversation. And I'm just so grateful that all of you decided to take time out of your day to be here. I do want to leave on this point. As we're talking about rentals, multi-units, single-family homes, and we just take a look at the average salary for an Augusta Richmond County employee being around $56,000. I was able to get those numbers from our department. And the average home price is moving upwards to about $250,000 to $300,000. Well, that person can honestly, depending upon what their debt to income ratio afford, is about a $200,000 home. And that's just our employees. So when we talk about not just affordable housing, I love how someone said it, accessible housing. I believe it was Ms. Bernadette that said accessible housing. We want people to be able to live in housing until they reach that 38 age, maybe lower that 38 age at some point, if we're able to get our housing down. But this is not just an Augusta Richmond County problem. It is a national problem. And when you turn on national news, you get to take a look at that. So how do we work together cohesively to be able to solve these problems and these issues and plan the communities that we want to live, work, and play in? So I think that's so important. But this conversation is just a start. We're gonna come back. And so thank you all so much for your input. I took a lot of notes, and I'll also be reviewing because I want to put these notes together so we can address everything that came up and get those data points. Thank you so much, Chamber, for emphasizing, both chambers, for emphasizing and re-emphasizing that because that's important. So thank you all so much.